Hello, I'm Alex Morgan. I'm a new hire as an associate research scientist. And for this, my job talk was just a couple of months ago, so I figured rather than getting down into the details, I would just sort of chat about a few projects I'm working on, who I am. So I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. I got my interest in geology from spending a lot of time as a kid and currently as an adult in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Um, and it was from this that when it came time to pick a major, I figured I would go geology because then I could just get paid to keep mountain climbing. And in the process, while I was at UC Santa Cruz, go Slugs, I took a planetary science class with Francis Nimmo, loved it, ended up sticking with it. I was a research associate with Jeff Moore at NASA Ames for a year before going to work on my PhD with Alan Howard at the University of Virginia. And then for the last 3 years, I've been a postdoc at the Center for Earth and Planetary Studies, which is the planetary research division of the National Air and Space Museum of the Smithsonian Institution. And so my broad interests are in geomorphology, particularly fluvial geomorphology, so processes involving rivers, and other fluvial processes, mainly arid regions, so that includes deserts on Earth, but also Mars. And geomorphology, I've always thought is cool because when we look across the solar system, there's a lot of these planetary landscapes, which superficially they look very similar to what we see on Earth. And that's regardless of whether you're looking at rivers or lakes or rounded cobbles on Titan or mountains and glaciers on Pluto or what appear to be deltas and river valleys on Mars. And so my work is using remote sensing observations as well as field analog work and numerical modeling to better interpret the types of observations that we're able to make through remote sensing. And so a few projects. One is I talked about this in my job talk, but looking at alluvial fans on Mars. And so this involves a global survey of Mars landforms and documenting fan morphology, their geographic distribution, trying to get a sense of lithologic and climatologic controls on their formation. This also includes mapping of a few select examples and also examining terrestrial alluvial fans. And this is both through field study and also a meta-analysis of previous uh, documented work. And part of this is an expansion of earlier work by Brian Dade and colleagues, where it's looking at that fan and watershed morphology, or the relationship between those two, is really just a function of uplift and precipitation. That's what's going on in these lower two graphs. And so, and in these, Mars is the gray area. And so we can simplify the problem down to a pretty simple relationship and have a better sense of what conditions might have been like for the Martian fans. Another is the looking at, as a field analog, these alluvial fans in the Atacama Desert, which appear to be the best morphologic analog we have on Earth to the Martian fans. They're big, they're low gradient, they contain a high proportion of fine grained sediment, and my SSW was selected. And so we have field work planned for hopefully in summer of 2021 to go down there and look at not only fan forming processes, but also what happens to these fans after they're sitting there for a while. So how do channels get left in inverted relief and how we can better interpret the features that we're seeing on Mars. Another analog, I talked about this in my talk, these large fans in the Aklavik Range in northern Canada, very remote region. This involves geologic surveying, sort of classic geologic mapping, um, drone photogrammetry, stratigraphic sections, and total and terrestrial lidar scanning. Try to better understand what kinds of sediment transfer processes are going on in these fans, and also what kind of weathering processes are providing that sediment under a cold and dry or cold and icy climate, like may have been the case on Mars during the period of fan formation. The other one, so that's the field side of things, and we want to try to use what we get in the field and from remote sensing to develop a numerical model to try to understand the fans. And so this has been a long uh, process. Alan, my former advisor, is now here at PSI. He'll vouch how this has been complicated, but continuing to work on it. And the idea is that we're trying to model fine grained sedimentation on these large fans through routing flow downstream, looking at bedload transport, overbank transport, and then avulsion, so the formation of the new channels. Um, and this is just an example of some of the output here where we can have a number of control knobs, like the input discharge, the bed load size, suspended sediment flux, changes in base level, mud flow rheology, bank erodibility. And these are all manifestations of the prevailing climatic, mostly climatic conditions at the time that these fans are forming. And so in this model, it's recording both the fraction of sediment that's deposited as bed load transport or these overbank mud flows. And when the fan is finally built, then we can look at the stratigraphy within the modeled fan, and try to get a sense of where, if there are any patterns and how things are forming. So another project I'm working on is looking at global trends in Martian valley network morphology. And so sort of a first step in this has been, there are a number of these valley network maps. There's been 4 or so iterations of these, and we kind of realized that they're all, I don't want to say bad, but they need some significant updates. And so I have a PDART. I've submitted a PDART proposal to try to get funding to do this. But as sort of preliminary work in the upper left image, we've been working on removing a bunch of features that may have been visible in low resolution older data, but now we're just not. You look at it in high resolution data, you just don't see anything. And looking at the relationship between valley network morphology and the distribution of lakes, and see what we can say about lake overburst floods early in Martian history, and if there are patterns in valley network cross section or cross profiles. So whether they're U-shaped or V-shaped. And so just a couple other things. One is this work in Hawaii. So we're supposed to go there this year. We're also supposed to go to northern Canada this year, but obviously that didn't happen. So it's all been postponed to 2021. And so here, we originally went here to look at these alluvial fans on the south side of the Big Island. Turns out they're not really the best Martian analog for range reasons. I went into more detail in my job talk, but they are a really interesting spot to look at basaltic bedload transport, or the transport of this bedload sediments, or what happens to these basaltic grains as they move downstream. And so if we're looking at one of these grains, can we interpret the environment in which it is transported and how we can apply that to Mars? And then kind of as a final thing, this is an ongoing project that we're working on in Australia. This involves a significant amount of driving. So the black in the upper left image is our route. We cover about 2,000 kilometers. So it's a good chunk of the continent. About 700 kilometers of that is off-road, which involves trials and tribulations such as flat tires and engines catching on fire, and you see flames coming out of the engine when you're 300 miles from the nearest help. That can be a bit nerve-wracking. But as part of this, we're doing drone flights for photogrammetry of the linear dunes in this area, and also sampling at multiple depths, with the idea of with the photogrammetry looking at sort of a multi-year study of how linear dune morphology changes. And with the sampling at multiple depths, that's getting at geochemistry, so like the maturity of sand, looking at the feldspar relative to the quartz concentrations, and also getting samples for optically stimulated luminescence dating, so we can get a sense of how long material has been buried within these dunes. And that is it. So thanks for your time.